Hi people, I'm Johnny. I have MA in archaeology from a European university. And why I'm making this tutorial video is because among the archaeologists, sorry to say this, but there is a really bad reputation with metal detection hobbyists. I have the same hobby myself, and I figured it'd be reasonable to make a video where I would give some tips how to do metal detection hobby with more scientific proficiency than what I see and what my fellow archaeologists often see. The reason why there's such bad reputation with the metal detection hobbyists among the archaeologists is because a lot of times the hobbying, how it's performed is like I just poke a shovel in the ground and turn over the soil and pick up whatever I find, but there's no documentation done. And even worse is that a lot of times a lot of findings are not documented in any way or reported to the relevant authorities, we could say. So basically that information is just lost. Unless you have a time machine, it's really hard to bring the old back. You can always build new, but how do you bring the old back? I think the same thing applies to, destroying old buildings. If you can fix it, rather fix it than destroy it, because you can always build new, but how do you bring the old back? And why is it important to cherish the old stuff and document it properly? Is because how I deem it, and I wish others deem it the same way, is that it's shared background, it's shared history, it's shared, ancestry, so to speak. Be you from that area where you're doing your metal detection hobby, be you living there, you have any background there or not, just know that some people do. And it's even if it doesn't seem significant to you, it can be that, maybe 50, maybe 100 years in the future, what seems like insignificant trash now, maybe it is not that in the future. And maybe something doesn't, seem important to you, but it might be to some other person, or to, maybe you just don't know it bears any significance. Say you find bottle caps, you think, okay, these are just bulk crap. I don't need to even document these. I just dump them back in the ground, or just throw them away, or maybe put them in some kind of box where I keep all this junk. You know, but what doesn't seem significant now, maybe that in the future. And what doesn't seem significant to you may be significant to some other person. So in other words, we mustn't be selfish. And I think this is, it's hard to ask people to do this. I think the museums and such, whatever country or place you're from, whatever laws and regulations pertain to this kind of hobby in that given place, maybe there's a total ban, maybe they're total lax about it, maybe you need to go through some courses to have a permission to be doing this metal detection. But maybe they don't want to demand too much from the metal detection people, because they think that maybe they don't report anymore. If they want to uphold very high standards, maybe people no longer report their findings. So this is a problem too. That if you follow the steps that I'm going to show in this video, maybe your hobby isn't that much fun anymore. In my opinion, it gets much more fun, but it gets much more arduous. You will be working many times more than you would. It's no longer treasure hunting, which I think is a wrong attitude. You shouldn't go treasure hunting or item hunting. You should go, I think every metal detectionist should be hunting for knowledge. And it should be shared with other people, not just for yourself. So I reiterate myself, don't be selfish, be a team player. Don't hunt for items, don't hunt for treasures, hunt for knowledge. So that means whatever you find needs to be documented properly, at least to a certain extent. Like you could consider how metal detection hobby should be done is like it's like making a test bed. Is there items like archaeologically, things should be done archaeologically, and it gives a lot of credence and respect to the whole metal detection community if you do your hobby properly, because like first of all that there should be knowledge that what is found, even the smallest items, should be documented. And there should be knowledge that where it has been excavated, how deep it is, and what's the orientation like, north, east, south, like, and one very key thing, very important thing is if you start finding a lot of items, stop. There's probably a big context you're destroying if you uproot all those items. So stop, inform a professional. And I know sometimes it takes time for someone to arrive and check out the things, but give it that time, and because it's really horrible that so much knowledge is lost with lacking methods, and I think this kind of video should exist more online. And people, I really hope people will follow this, like these tips, and feel free to share this video. By all means, I hope you share this as far and wide as you possibly can, because I want to get this message through, and I know my fellow archaeologists, a lot of them want to get this message through to the wide population. And there's always going to be people who are like, this guy's a punk, he's an idiot, I'm never going to do this, and it's so arduous, and this hobby loses its fun if I do this, and there's all these mosquitoes, and it's freaking hot, it's raining, and I don't want to spend so much time doing all this crap. And but I still hope you would, because it's a shared past, and I think it has to be cherished. And as a metal detection hobbyist myself, I hope the reputation would get better. And I don't want to vouch for any kind of communistic collective things, but I think we should encourage each other and even kick each other's asses a bit. Like, hey, you should do this better. And I'm gonna go more in detail as this video starts. And there are some key things that, in my opinion, should always be followed. But it's up to you how you do the actual performance. But certain criteria should be met, and I'm gonna show you my way of doing things and what those criteria are. So thanks for everyone for listening and watching and sharing, and especially caring about what I'm saying, and I hope you would follow these guidelines if you may. And one thing I want to really say more before we advance to the video is that even if it's maybe in some places it's legal to go to somebody's field and excavate the place without asking the landowner, but please don't go in somebody else's property and do excavation, because maybe that person wants to do the excavation himself, or maybe that person doesn't really want somebody digging there. So be respectful and be caring. So let's improve this reputation we have as a metal detection community, and let's let's do a good job. Thank you. Now finally, let's get to it. So here you see a picture of the tools that I use when I'm excavating, when I'm doing my metal detection things. When you're in an archaeological field work, there would be more tools and things too that you would have to care about. But now we're concentrating on metal detection and how I dig my holes, how I do my excavation and research. So let's start from the right lower corner. There you see a hammer. I use it for two purposes. One is if there are my metal tools, if I need to fix something like you see there's a saw or there are like these metal trowels, which are the small, tools you scrape the soil with. They're in the middle below. And you see a shovel. If I need to fix them in any way, I'm using this small hammer. And the second thing is there in the middle, you see a north arrow. Now, sometimes I prefer to use a blue color arrow. It's made of plastic. We'll get back to this later. So there you see two holes, which I use to attach it facing north, so it doesn't move by accident. At least not that easily. So I'm using like just sticks that I find, or I might take some nails that I run through these holes to keep the arrow steady. So that's what I use the hammer for. And then you see the shovel. I'm only using the shovel when I'm digging the topsoil. In this case, it would be the grass and its roots and things. So I don't go very deep. You can see there the tip, the black paint, which is, by the way, a bad thing, the black paint. I noticed because it gets into, it chips off into your excavation area. Sometimes it chips off, and it's not that the big deal, but it's preferable to, to reduce the contamination, so to speak. So I should really get tools that either don't chip off the paint or are unpainted. Anyhow, you can see the worn off area in the shovel. That's pretty much how deep I go when I excavate. The When I remove the top layer. Then you see some soft pads I use under my knees when I'm bending down. It's arduous work to excavate an archaeological, you know, um, hole, so it's hard on your knees, it's hard on your back, and it's a pain in the I don't want to say where. So I'm using these pads to create a bit of comfort. Then in the middle you see the trowels I mentioned before. The ones with blue handles and the one with orange color in the handle are made of metal. Difference is the shape. The black one and orange, black and orange, that has a little bit arching in the trowel itself, the spade itself. And the ones on the right with the blue handle, those are flat. The one on the far right, that is sharper than the one next to it. And yes, they dig better in a hard soil than the plastic one, which you see in the middle, which has an arch too. The one with a little bit green at the tip of the handle, the black, otherwise black. That's actually my main tool. I know many archaeologists would probably disagree with me, but I don't like to use these metal tools unless I have to. like when I'm smoothing the profile, which we will get back later. What is the profile? The pit profile. But I like to scrape off things, which I will show later how it's done. I like to scrape off things with the plastic tool because it wears out whatever is there, rocks, ceramic, metal, whatever findings. It doesn't wear them out as badly as these metal tools. All right, next to it, those are not any specific archaeological tools. I think those ones you see, the black ones, the metal and plastic one, they're just gardening tools, and ones on the right side is made for laying bricks, for laying the plaster or concrete or whatever. So they are not in specific design tools. And by the way, I'm not sponsored by any of the names you see here, so please disregard them. No, this is no product placement. And there you see a small paper which says Home Yard, September 7th, 2023. That's the date of the excavation, and I'll get back to it later. And then you see two markers. One has a yellow shaft, and the other one has a white one, and in the middle there's a normal pen, ink pen. The ink pen I'm using for the notebook and the pad under it, which you see the blue with the grids. That's for documentation purposes. And the markers I use for mini grips, the mini grips which you see on the left side. I tend to use different size mini grips for different findings. And I prefer to put one excavation pit findings within either one or more mini grips. Depending what I find, I might put different layers in different mini grips, or just place them all in one mini grip. But I prefer like one layer when you excavate layers, layer by layer. One layer being in one mini grip. At least not mix them. So it makes it a lot easier to manage the findings later on. Okay, let's head on to the middle row. So you see the North Star. This is actually one key thing that I want to point out. Always place a North Star. Like which direction, like when you find something, let's say you find a dagger or something that it might be pertinent to know which direction it is facing. So this is one of the key things that I want to point out to all the metal detection dudes. Use a North Star, please. It is very important. And there you see a normal compass next to it. And this is a telescope saw, which you can fold it inside the handle. And this is for when there are roots and things that you need to cut in the pit. Then you can use this one, or normal clippers on the left side of the saw. And then I got these are like foldable measuring tools. They're 20 centimeters per each. It folds like let me see. It is 6 different sectors, 6 different parts, and each part, as far as I can remember, is 20 centimeters. And we're gonna see it in the later pictures. So these are also very important tools for measuring, and there maybe it's not very visible at the moment, but later on it will be. There's a rubber band around on the left side measuring tool. There you got a rubber band on the right side of it, and I'm gonna show you later like why I'm using it. It's for measuring depth of the pit. And let's head on to the top rope. We got these are actually cocktail sticks with a little bit orange tape on them. These are used for to mark when I'm beeping. Um, I place them where it beeps. So then I may come back later and start digging the pits. So what I often do is I prefer to like check the whole area, like say 5 by 5 meters area, and then I put sticks where it's beeping, and then I decide where I start to excavate. And that's a 30-meter long measuring tape next to the sticks, the yellow thing with a roll. That can be used for measuring. Like if you like, I'm gonna show later how to do it more precisely. But I use Google Maps and I set my location data on. Then I see more or less precisely where I am, where the pit is, and I like to take a picture of the area that I'm digging, and place every pit on the map later after. But I take the location in the field, of course. I'm taking the location of each pit, and and I use this measuring tool if there's like some very clear natural like things like rocks or maybe there's a house corner. You can measure from that. You take a point and you can measure distance to your bits, and you can have a more precise, map made later on. And then you got the gloves, of course. It's advisable to wear gloves. Those are typical. I think they're rubber laden, some fabric gloves, normal gardening gloves. Then there's a sieve I made by myself. This is a 5 millimeter mesh. So each gap you see there is 5 millimeter, and this is I use some kind of just normal web that is used to protect like trees and bushes from rabbits and such creatures, so they don't go gnaw and eat those plants. So I used some kind of normal sieve. I think it was sold under the name like Rabbit Net or something, and it's sturdy enough. So I made a homemade sieve. I got bigger sieves too, like designed for two people to be used by two people. But when I'm alone outside and the excavation pits are not that big, so I I just carry a small sieve like this one. So I dug a hole in the middle of some kind of, I don't know what it is, some kind of plastic plate for a flower pot or something. And on the left side, you can carry these in a pouch or somewhere. You can just feel free. This is actually uh, you can always post edit the stuff in the pictures, but I prefer to, for the sake of myself, and it's oftentimes it's also quite clear when I mark like which number hole it is. So I start from each date, like you can see the homestead, the paper, home yard, September 7th, 2023. So it's got the date, and then you got like how many hole it is you're digging, and which layer it is. I'm going to show all more precisely later. So that's like which number hole it is of that day, and which layer it is when you take pictures. And so on. These are some kind of laminate that I just chipped into pieces and wrote these things. These are not really weatherproof, so it's advisable if you use laminate or whatever you use. You don't even have to use these, but I mean, it makes it a lot easier to document things later on, and you don't have to necessarily add any, at least not that much data in the picture, because you're already, so to speak, manually, analogically placing the data there. Like so yeah, I think this is pretty. You should carry this maybe in some kind of waterproof bag. But anyhow, so this is somewhat all about my tools, and then some like plastic tarp for where you place stuff that you dig up, like the soil, and then you sieve it on the other side of the tarp, or you can get two tarps. I was using a plastic bag, two plastic bags, which are too small. I would advise you buy a few euros. You can get like for 4 or 5 euros, you can get like 2 by 3 meters plastic covers that are sturdy enough for the job. So when you sieve, one heap is for the sieved sand, one is unsieved, and then later on you can just dip it all back when you're ready to fill the hole. So okay, so that's enough for this. Let's head on to the excavation. So here in this picture, you see the first layer that I'm gonna excavate. You can alternatively call this the top layer, whereas your number one layer would be the one below that one. But I like to call this the number one layer. Just my advice is just be consistent in the way you do it. It doesn't really matter which way you do it. Just be consistent. And here you can see the little flag with the orange thingy tape. This is where it beeped. So I placed around this place where it was beeping this measuring tool with 20 centimeter sectors. So you can see it is 40 by 40 the grid. So this is how I measure how I make grids. And if there were many things side by side, then you can extend it to 60 by 60, 80 by 80. And in case, like, if you would find something that's really long, so it wouldn't fit in the grid, then you would expand it and start digging another pit until you reach the same layer with that extra long thingy, whatever you're finding there. So you get the point. So you would that I would still call it the same pit. Like in this case, it's number one. You say it's layer one of pit number one, excavation number one, and there you can see the home yard and the name and date of this excavation. You can name it whatever. You can name it whatever you want. But this is done in my home yard, so I just named it home yard. And oftentimes you see things named like according to the name of the location, or maybe it can be something that describes the location really well, like a valley, a rocky valley, and then you put the date. Or you can Rocky Valley number one, Rocky Valley number two. According to dates, you can give names to it. But just what you see there is the North Star, sorry, the North Arrow, and number one for the pit number one, and the name of the excavation site and the date, and the layer marker, and my notebook, which I will get back to later. So the point is, I repeat myself. If you find something extra long that doesn't fit in the grid, I would still call it the pit number one, excavation number one, but I would expand it and take a lot of pictures so you can see. I will show you how to document the pictures. Take a lot of pictures so you can see in the picture that you expanded the grid. And later on, I'll show you a paper that I designed where you can mark the size of the pit. So the thing is that you would come down to the same level where you found this item. So basically, you could name it like pit number one, pit number two, as you wish. The thing is that the data has to be manageable. You need to be able to bring the data into a comprehensive, manageable um, form, so that other people too, not only you, can understand what's being done, what's being found, what's there, what you're looking at in the pictures and so on. So it's a kind of You can improvise a lot. Just be consistent and be clear. That would be my point. And here is an example. If you don't want to call the top layer, the soil layer, the top soil, so to speak, that's not a correct word for it. That has a different meaning actually. But like the ground surface level, if you don't want to call that layer number one, then you can, for example, call it top, like I've written here. I'm not going to use this, but just for an example. I know that my drawings ain't nothing fancy, but hey, we're not taking part in a drawing competition. Anyhow, what I got here is a demonstration of how to expand your excavation in case you end up finding something that doesn't fit in your original excavation area. So, what you see here, the red lines, they delineate the your excavation area. So it can be whatever size, but let's call it 40 by 40 centimeter. And then you see the brown area, the brown lines. Those are like the grids. You because it's good to think about excavation area in terms of grids, like homogeneous sized grids. Like in this case, it would be 20 by 20 centimeters. And the orange dot there in the middle, that denotes the where I had the flag, like where the originally the thing was beeping. So here you would like for example, like let's start with saying like when I peel off the surface layer, I use my, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I use my shovel. So I would poke it pretty much like in a small grids like this, and then I would remove the soil. I will show you later how I sieve it. So I would poke the area with the tip of the shovel on all sides. First I would probably go around the exterior side, the outside grid of the excavation area. Then I would proceed to the inner areas and make these kind of grids. Depending on the soil type, it's either easy or hard, or you might have to make smaller cuts, so to speak, smaller areas that you then remove. And then I would remove them and sieve them. Now, in archaeology, you would often go into very minute details in terms of within the grid, which corner it was found, or you might sometimes just make. Usually, I would say what I've seen most is like it's 50 by 50 centimeter grids. So, but when I'm doing my metal detection, I use 20 by 20 centimeter area that I then expand. It's like 40 by 40 and 60 by 60. Those are the lengths that I use usually. But you can do as you wish, as long as it's mentioned there clearly, like what is the size of your excavation, and you can change it depending on how you wish. Like with each pit you dig, and so I would remove the topsoil in the same manner. But anyhow, what this picture now represents is like you're thinking about your layer. This could be any layer. This could be layer 1,000, even if you so may. This is So you think about it in terms of grids, and you can decide the size of the grids. So then you would proceed to, when you find something like in the second picture, you found a knife, and it doesn't fit in your original grid. So how you expand it is, I would suggest you make another grid of the same size, or you can make it smaller if it's like if you're using very huge, like 1 by 1 meter areas. Maybe you don't need to dig that large. Maybe you just expand it like half that size, like 50 by 50, or like in this case, this is like I said earlier, it's 40 by 40 centimeter. So now I made another similar size, same size area next to it, So that, and then I would start doing the same thing. I would start all over from the beginning, and I would excavate until I reached the same level with the where I was with the original excavation area. So I would do the whole goddamn arduous work, see through all the same layers, and I would take new pictures and everything. I would do the same again that I did before with the excavation next to it. And you don't have to go like with the same side by side profile. You can step it down a little bit. You can step it aside a little bit if you like for example here, if the knife was not uniformly aligned with the shape of your the angle of your excavation, you can do it like this also, or you can make a larger area excavation next to it, also larger than the original one. So it's up to you. But but I just want to show that you can. It doesn't have to align uniformly. Just keep it in some kind of grid pattern, like you see in the picture. That is makes handling the data much easier and understanding the pictures and everything much easier. So here in this video, I made grids with my shovel, and I'm taking the surface layer off. And don't mind me fiddling. I'm talking to the guy who was working as a cameraman that day. I removed the original sounds from my videos that you see in this presentation. So I would first check out that there is nothing in the hole that I dug and nothing in the chunk that I removed from the hole. And I would put it on my sieve, and then I would start sieving, checking if there's anything. I usually sieve one layer in one heap, and then I dump the heap next to it in the dump tarp. And like I mentioned earlier, these are too small. These plastic bags. I usually use tarps, larger, like 2 by 3 meter tarps. One for dumping and one for sieving. And it's advisable that after each layer, you would dump all the contents in the dump on the dump tarp, because you would then, if you happen to see something later, then you know it's not from the layer that you're digging now, or that you know that it's from that layer and not from the previous layers. So it's advisable to dump it each time after a layer is done, or you can do it after each sieving. Um, yeah, I'm checking the rock here that there's no any human activity visible, like that is not chipped off, like man-made or something. There are no sharp edges. It looks very natural. It's a natural rock. And when you're doing metal detection, you're not only looking for metals, you're actually looking for anything related to human activities. So don't be concentrated just on metals. I'm doing this. I'm dumping it into the dump heap, and then I'm taking the next chunk, and I would repeat this until the whole layer is done. And then I would proceed to layer number two, and that those are a little bit different from this surface layer because you need to smooth them, and the method of exposing the layers is different from this one. So here I am using my plastic tool, smoothing and checking out the layer number two. So I start this immediately after removing the surface soil. I don't smooth what is underneath there until I'm ready to start digging for the layer number two. I see through the area with my eyes, might poke the soil a little bit. See, there's nothing of interest dropped from the chunks that I removed from the surface layer, and then I start smoothing the profiles, the vertical edges of the excavation I will smoothen later, and that's a little bit different topic that I will cover later in this video. So here I am. I'm not using a separate tool where I would pick the sand. Actually, in this case, it's more like a soil, like a brown soil. And I don't use a separate tool where I collect it and then put it on the sieve because the space is so cramped, it's so limited. So I'm just using my hands to pick up and dump stuff on the sieve. So I'm doing this until I done the whole layer. So it's basically smoothing, digging, smoothing slash digging, sieving, and repeating the same thing. And if, like you see, if I move anything on the layer, there's on layer rocks or anything, I try to put them back the best I can because we need to take the picture first and then we can remove them if they are on the surface. If they are deeper under the ground, don't pull them out, don't rip any roots and such because you will disturb the soil. And archaeology, the excavation in archaeology is destructive, so it's really you cannot repeat it. So you have to, when you do it, you have to be meticulous because you are destroying the context or whatever therein is underneath the soil. So yeah, this is what I do layer by layer, and there are no findings in this layer, so I proceed to the next one, but not before documenting the layer in the pictures. So I'm placing back my measuring tools, and I mentioned the rubber band earlier when I was introducing the tools. So here you see it. That's used to measure the depth of your excavation. So each layer depth is marked in my notebook, and then I will place them in my documentation, which I will show later. So I'm placing these measuring tools in place so I can take a picture of the layer. And here you can see a picture I took. I selected the best one among maybe 5 pictures that I took. Therein you can once again see the measuring tools, the north arrow, and the relevant markings to denote which excavation pit it is, which date and name of the excavation it is, and which layer it is. And you can see the rubber band is really helpful in visualizing where the surface is, where the surface of the ground is. Otherwise, it would be really hard to tell from a picture where it is. So that's how I use it. When you zoom in the picture, I don't know, in this video maybe it's not that good quality, possibly, but you could see where the rubber band is. You could see the depth. Okay, now time to excavate layer number 3. I'm switching to the metal tool because the soil is getting rougher. And I pinpointed the dump heap after each layer. I forgot to mention this earlier. And this is the thing, dude. Don't tap with the metal tools, especially. Just check out with your hands. Is it removable? This was in the layer 2 picture already, and we checked the rock, the stone, that it's not part of some structure and it's not, any visible signs of human activity there. And scoop like that, but not like this. Don't poke holes, but do like this instead. Okay, fast forward a bit. We come across a root. Don't pull it out because you're going to disturb the ground layers. Instead, use clippers like what you see in the picture, or any other clipper that will do the job. So I decided that I would not cut the root because I noticed there's something glimmering next to it. And lo and behold, and it's the first finding and probably the thing that gave the signal to my metal detector, because later on I proceeded to check out and didn't find anything else beeping there. And here I'm explaining that you shouldn't really remove the finding by force, rather keep it there. If it's even a little bit under the soil and doesn't come off easily without using force. So instead, I'm starting to smoothen out the profile and clearing off the layer bottom to later document the finding in its original location. And usually, how deep do I dig is between 5 and 10 centimeters, sometimes just a couple of centimeters if I start finding stuff. So I'm trying to keep keep the finding in its original location while I'm doing this. There can someone would have maybe documented the finding first and then proceeded to do this, but I was confident enough that I wouldn't move the finding, move the item. So I proceeded to clear out the remainder of the layer. And here you can see two pictures that I took of the layer. And notice how of course, I moved the rubber band up to meet with the surface layer of the ground. And also, I kept the finding in its original position. I cleaned it just a tad bit with my finger to make it more visible in the picture. And the next thing I would do is I would put the finding in a plastic bag that I would mark with the necessary info. And you can see it here. I have a habit of taking pictures like this before I put the item in the bag. So there you would see the item which was just found and the approximate size of the item, and then the ready written bag. It's a little bit unclear in the picture, but there on the bag it says Home Yard, September 7th, 2023. EXC number 1, so that's excavation number 1, layer number 3, bag 1. And this info I would use later on when I'm documenting the findings. Now here you can see the finding in the bag itself. And this was the only item I found in this layer. Now I would continue digging a couple more layers until I'm sure that the so-called cultural layer is finished. I would document the even if there were no findings, I would document the layers as I've shown before. Because in archaeology, normally when you stop finding stuff, you still dig a couple of layers because you never know. There may be empty layers where there were no human activity. And it's not uncommon to make test pits on a couple of places to make sure that there really isn't more to excavate, like before you fill the hole. So I did dig a couple of layers deeper, but I don't find it necessary to show in this video. It's already long enough. However, there are a few to do and not to do's that I want to talk more about. I would advise if you, within the same layer, if you find um, different materials, if you suspect they might impact each other negatively or somehow contaminate each other, like for example, a rusty metal piece, would it contaminate some, say you find some even paper or uh, other organic material or even inorganic material, or if you find something heavy that might damage the other findings. And with contamination or negative impact, I don't mean only like changing the structural properties, but also like even coloring, smearing the other findings. So in the example case, I said like a piece of metal that is rusted, it would shed the rust onto other findings which before didn't have that rust on them. So that would be, I would consider it contamination. So I would suggest you avoid that. Therefore, in some cases, it is best to place different findings in different findings bags. You can basically even name them same like bag number one, bag number, you know, point two, 1.2, 1.3, and so on, if that helps you to manage the information. And I tend to keep my findings in the bags where I placed them originally after I documented them at home or in the somewhere after the excavation wherever I'm doing the documentation. You can number the bags like 1.1, 1.2 if it makes you like if you want to keep the same layer findings in the same numbering. But you can also number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So maybe in layer 3 you would have 3 bags, and then 1, 2, 3, and then in the next layer you would have maybe just 1 bag and so on. So it's up to you. Do you want to, or you can just name them however you like as long as it is comprehensible. And another very important thing is, and as soon as you taking pictures of the findings, place them in the findings bags and close the bags. You better use airtight bags because the idea is that the moisture level within the findings wouldn't change very radically. And once the things have dried, with few exceptions, usually don't remoisten the things, at least not very much. When you're cleaning them later on, I would suggest you only use soft tools like wood, some brushes, and don't use a lot of force. And I, within the field, don't I wouldn't rub them or clean them very much because it's often, you know, it's you're not placing the item on a table or where you can do steady work. So I would really wait until you reach a proper place where to do the cleaning, and I do the cleaning at the same time when I'm doing the documentation, like taking more photos of the findings, which I will get back to later in this video. So put the things quickly in a sealed bag is very key. And you can also take a chunk of uh, place it inside a little bit of soil where it was found in the place. Take around the finding, or like where you found the items, and you can place it inside a little bit of soil. That will help keeping the moisture and the conditions of the finding more steady. Because when things underground get in contact with air, some items tend to deteriorate really quickly. And after I documented them, the findings, I might make new bags for some findings that has to be, of course, mentioned in the documentation report, the items report, which we'll get back to later. Um, but I anyhow keep them in an airtight place, and I place them in a dark place, like where no sunlight, where no any source of light can reach them. That's how I store them, but we will get back to storing the findings later on in the video. And one more thing I would like to add is that if there is risk of damaging the finding or losing information because of the cleaning process, maybe it's best to not clean the finding. You can leave it dirty. It's not a wrong thing to do. It's actually very advisable. Rather dirty than damaged. Now there are still a few things I need to show in terms of excavating. Here in this video, you see me fiddling with a rock. I placed it there. It wasn't there originally, but I would say don't remove it. Just dig around it if it's, say, deeper than 3 centimeters under the ground. Just dig around it and another layer. And of course, do the necessary documentations like take a photo of the rock. And here I'm showing if it's inside a profile. I would say my same 3 centimeter rule is what I use. Like if I deem it in any way necessary, like to keep it there, as if I'm thinking that it's a place, it's from a fireplace or some, you know, as a consequence of some human activity it is there, then I would keep it and just dig around it as if it were any other item that I found. But if I think that it's just natural, I will just document it and pick it open, remove it when I'm kind of reach the bottom of the rock. And if it's not very deep in the profile, like my 3 centimeter rule again. So these are the things to consider, like when you find something at the edge of your excavation pit. Now here's another example. There in the middle you see an Allen key. It's a 6-sided key. And on the edge with an orange color plastic hilt, you see a knife. I placed them there. They're not there originally. And in both cases, I would not remove them by pulling. I would excavate around them until I reach the edge of the item. So in a knife's case, you would expand your pit to east. I think this direction is east, yes. And in the case of the Allen key, you would dig further down another layer. And of course, documenting with photographs, etc. as you proceed. So don't pull it out like that. Same with the knife. And another thing to consider is how do you mark them? In which layer did you find them? I would suggest you when you bag them, when you finally reach the end of the item, so to speak, and you can remove it from the pit. I would really mark them as a multi-layer finding. So where it first pop into your eyes, this item, and then when you finally removed it from its location, I would mark it like safe. So from layer 3 to, say, maybe layer 5 is where I would excavate down and remove the item. So the finding is from layer 3 to layer 5, so it's a multi-layer finding, but it's up to you how you mark it, as long as it's clear that in which position, like from photographs and such, in which position the item was. So I want to get back briefly to the topic on North Arrow. When possible, I consider it reasonable to place your excavation pit aligning with the northeast southwest direction. It makes it a whole lot easier to read the pictures and such. Like if you're if you place your excavation pit not aligned with the northern direction, I think it makes it a whole lot harder to organize in your head, like which direction the profiles are and items are pointing. And finally, before you fill in the hole, when the excavation is done, take picture of the profile. Um, I would suggest preferably from all sides, and then you treat it as um, a layer in the layer sheet, and you would, file it as and fill it in as a layer. You can either treat the whole profile as one layer, or you can take each profile as a separate layer, and therein you would mark, the soil type things and the pictures, of course, and any additional notes, and you would, of course, in the pictures you would write down like which direction to which direction it's been taken, and um, but uh, you better clear the profile first, like make it smooth, and it's but don't like tarnish the profile. So make it as natural as possible, where you see different land deposits, the different colors and such. So uh, don't distort the profile before you take the picture, and put a measuring tape there. Do just treat it as a normal layer where you put measuring tapes and all these, the north star and things, the north arrow, I mean. And and then after that you can pretty much start filling the hole. At least that's the order of things how I do it. Please remember to fill the holes nicely, like as closely resembling as it were before you started the excavation. Now, I ever thought about whether I should put some rocks and paint red painted rocks under the close to the surface layer, like say 10, 15 centimeters down, so it would mark where I had excavated, and if someone went excavating, they would know that, hey, this place has been excavated, and of course I would write it down in the report, the excavation report. But then I thought, like, hey, maybe in the future somebody's gonna excavate there, and they think there used to be some cult that used to worship red rocks or something, so maybe in the end it's gonna be counterproductive. But just to give you an idea, that's one way to market, hey, this place has been excavated already. So you can paint rocks red and dump them under the soil when you fill when you fill the gaps. But I don't know, maybe a frost will bring them up, and they will not be there, and the paint will not be there after 50 years. Who knows? But just a wild idea. I think we're pretty much set for heading on to the next subject, writing an excavation report. So here you can see a kind of notebook that I write down things on. And what do I write down is this, like an excavation notebook, and later on I will transfer this data to a final final sheet. But I think from now on I will start using the final sheet in the field. You can get waterproof paper also. I never bought it myself, but I used it at an excavation site. I don't know really where you buy it, but I don't think it's too hard to find, at least online. And it's often used in like when you draw a layer, because in archaeological excavation you draw a layer, like by hand you draw a layer, and of course you photograph it too. But I think in the case of metal detection hobbyists, maybe that is going a little too far.
Maybe the photographs will suffice, but of course, if you want to draw a layer, then that'd be great. In the layer, you would see all kinds of structures like rocks and different soil types and so on. And by the way, we're going to discuss the different soil types as well later on in this lecture. So what you see here in the notebook is the name of the excavation home yard and the date, September 7th, 2023, and excavation number 1. Location, so coordinates here means that wherever you are, you would write the coordinates. I use Google Maps and I switch on my location data. I think in this day and age, it's pretty precise in terms of finding you. Maybe it depends where you are on this planet, but where I'm digging, usually I can find myself within a very, like, I think within a meter or two, maybe even more accurately. And I would write the coordinates here. So what I do is I use the Google Maps and I put my location data on, and therein a small dot appears, which is your location. Then I press on the dot, and will show you the coordinates. It's good to write somewhere in your report that you're using Google Maps for location data. Call me a tinfoil hat if you want, but I don't hold my. By the way, I don't hold my phone in my pocket, and neither do I keep my mobile data on, the internet data on when I'm not using it, because I think I'm somewhat electromagnetic sensitive, so I don't think these are healthy devices. Just a word of advice: I would really not, encourage anyone to use these devices for too long enduring times. So, but do as you please. I warn you. Um, there's lots of research on the subject too. That was just a side note, but an important one in my opinion. Protect yourself and those within within the radiation field. We got then you got the layer list. So layer number 1, and therein you see pictures. The pictures are taken. So usually, I'm using a separate camera because it's good in terms of focusing your picture, and I think it captures. Well, modern phones cameras are damn good. Maybe it's just an old habit, but it's also good somewhere you write like what device you're using for capturing your pictures. Just like somewhere maybe you write like you will see sheets that I wrote earlier. You can write like additional data, which phone or which metal detector or which um, um, other equipment you're using. It may have, it can sometimes be pertinent in terms of like knowing more properties about the pictures and so on. So, like in archaeological excavations, you would often like write down what ISO parameters you were using and so on. But I think that also goes a bit too far for metal detection things. But of course, if you want to write down such things, that's great. Um, but yeah, modern phones are their cameras are damn good. So maybe it's more like an old habit for me to use a camera. I'm using Nikon camera myself with a relatively large object. It's good for zooming, and you can retain a good quality of pictures because it's not digital zoom. So, but anyhow, if you want, you can write down those data in like some place in the sheets. I didn't create a separate slot for that data, but I will later on show you what kind of sheets I created. You can copy them there in the comment in the description section. You got the links to those. There are 3 different sheets. We'll get back to that later. So normally you get like the date when you take a picture. You get the date, like the time and date, and a running number. So herein you see 1529 is when. So you can see this from either the picture data the information, or you can just, like we did here with my friend, we were just checking the file name. So the date is of course September 7th, 2023. Just make sure, by the way, that your whatever device you're using is giving it's in the right date and time before you start taking pictures. So you got the time, 15:29. That's like 3 p.m. 29 minutes, and then you get the running number 1110A33 and W-E. That means the picture was taken from west to east. This is actually a good thing to write down, even if you see the north arrow in the picture. It's good to write down like from which direction to which direction the picture has been taken. So the same thing with layer 2, same thing with layer 3. There's more pictures of layer 3, so I wrote down 2 pictures there. And here in the next picture, I took these pictures before I dug into layer 4 and layer 5. So I didn't write down the layer 4 and 5 here. So you got well, I wrote homestead there by accident. So it's home yard, and once again the same info. And layer 3 continues here. Maybe I should get a bigger notebook. So layer 3 continues, and I've written there the depth, which I forgot to do in the other 2 layers. My mistake. So I've written down the depth of the layer from the surface of the ground. And in layer 3, you remember we found some kind of tinfoil object. So there's item, and it's the first item of the day. It's in the bag 1, and I've written a little bit like a red tin, a little description of the item. So it's red tin. So when you're checking the items, you can find them. Like if you were to find, say, 15 bottle caps, maybe you can just categorize them all as one finding. Like a 15x bottle cap, steel or iron. Well, the iron they would be probably, or plastic or whatever. Or you can say plastic slash iron slash if they're different types. So you don't have to set, like necessarily, write down each item separately. The same applies to the sheet, which I'm going to show you later. And then you got the photos of the finding. And if there were, this is like hypothetical, if there were item number 2, item number 3, then you would write them down as well. And there would be maybe a bag number 2, or maybe it would be in bag number 1. Maybe you put in the same bag if it's from the same layer. I would suggest separating the different layer findings in different bags. And oftentimes within the layer also, I would put them in separate bags, depending. But yeah, so I keep this kind of notebook of my findings. And then next up, oh, and by the way, uh, why the layer 3 is so shallow in relation to layer 2, only 1 centimeter, is because I found that the tinfoil item, so I stopped digging deeper. That's why normally I would dig a little bit deeper each layer, as I explained earlier in the video. Oh, by the way, number 2, I found out that I like to use a proper pen, like a ballpoint ink pen, uh, rather than a pencil, because the pencil tends to, if the paper's even a little bit wet, then both get, of course, problems. But I find pen to be a more proficient tool than pencil in the field. Just a little side note. And the second thing is, I suggest using permanent marker. Just make sure you're using a permanent marker, not something that you can wipe off or that dissolves if it gets wet when you, for example, write down stuff on your item bags. So just little side notes here. So finally, let's get on to finalizing the findings and excavations. So writing down in clear formats what you've done and what you found. Now here you can see 3 different type of report sheets. We're gonna go through them one by one in a minute. And feel free to edit them to your liking. For example, I've used centimeters here. So maybe for some people, inches are a more natural way. But I would encourage everyone to use centimeters and millimeters because, fully honest, I think those are way better measures when it comes to doing scientific study, in my opinion. They're clearer and they are more precise. But I'm not forcing anybody, though. And I would encourage everyone filling in, if not these reports, then similar reports of your findings and publish them somewhere. Wherever you are on this planet, maybe there are different methods of doing so, but please do publish them and hand them over to relevant authorities and institutions and such. Because, like we say in archaeology, if you're not publishing what you're doing, then you're not really benefiting anyone else but yourself. And one of the key messages of this and why I'm actually doing this, it's totally non-profit, using my own time and effort to do this video, is because I care and I worry about the, as I mentioned earlier, the shared past and preserving it and researching it and attaining more knowledge about it. So please do publish. And I would suggest when you print out a report sheet, be the ones that I'm showing here or similar ones or whatever kind of report sheets you're filling, I would suggest just make them one-sided prints because it's pretty easy for the paper to break and be become punctured when it's two-sided, when you're writing on two sides. Um, So, without further ado, let's move forward and check out these sheets in more detail. So, I have made three different kind of report sheets. There's this excavation report sheet, which pertains mostly to the layers, and then I have a separate sheet for items and a third sheet for soil samples. And I haven't really covered the soil samples yet in this lecture, so we're gonna go back to them later. Okay, now about this excavation report sheet. Now, I would suggest you print it out and then you digitize them after that. But you can also just, if you have the way of writing things directly on this PDF, then sure, do it if you want. We got the first question is continues on another sheet. So, is there this very excavation number? Does it this pit that you excavate, does it have only this one sheet or more? If you want, you can write there after that question how many sheets there are. Well, the basic info, name of the excavation site. So in the case of the example excavation that I've done in this video, it would be home yard. And then you get the date of the excavation and the excavation number, like which number of excavation it is from that day and that site, and how many layers there are in that excavation. And then you would proceed down to layer number, and then you would add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And the size of the excavation in centimeters, depth of the layer, actually it's the size of the layer, size of the excavation, however you want to call it, the depth of the layer. So it's, if it's the ground surface level, then just put there 0, I suppose, or top. You can write there top. I would maybe put 0. And I always read it as like I always measure these depths from the surface, ground surface level. I know there are uneven grounds, and then it can be hard to, because if I excavate on a slope, I would make it like horizontally a line. I wouldn't like. Well, you know what I mean. I would. So the other edge would be much taller than the other. So just be consistent when you measure the depth. So just pick one, maybe the tallest edge, and measure the depth from there. And then the next question is: are there any items found? Yes or no? Put a circle around the answer. And soil type and color. Now there is. I just checked it out. There are these Munsell charts, Munsell, and but they sell for about $300, €300, 300 British pounds. So they're quite expensive. I don't know if there's any legal issues printing it out, so you make sure about it, before you print it out. But the problem with the printing is maybe the colors. They should really match with the original colors, but maybe that is too maybe that is too precise, to use a muscle chart for this metal detection thing. But if you want to go there and do it, then I'm more than happy. I haven't done that. I haven't used the muscle chart, but I know it exists. And then there's the therein you can write like what type of soil it is. Is it a clay? Is it a silt? What color it is, or is there one? Yeah, therein you also put like a circle. Is there one soil type or multiple soil types? Because in the archaeological excavation, you have to come up with lots of different soil types within the excavation and within a single layer. Also, you can end up having lots of different soil types, and maybe there's rocks, and maybe you can like just feel free to like what size rocks there are. You can put like on average how many millimeters and so on. So feel free. Um, I should have maybe made a like another line there below that and between the photographs and soil type and color. So, but if you feel so, then you can continue below. If you can't fit in in just one line. Then there's photographs, like which photos you taken, and you can write there also like which photographs are taken of the items. But this is I'm more like dedicating this paper to the layer itself because there's a separate item sheet which I will show you later. Then there's item bags, like you can write which item bags are there, and additional notes. Maybe in the additional notes you can write more about the soil type and color, for example. Okay, so then we got the other half of this paper. It just continues like the next layer and next layer and so on. And then the name of the excavator is always good to know. Who to contact. You can write your email below or phone number or whatever. You can write it down there below if you like it. It's always good to know where to contact you, how to contact you. And then we got the excavated items paper. Now the same basic info, but in the layers you would like layer numbers. You would write each number where there is a finding. So above, next to excavation number, you would fill in like the previous paper, but the layers number you would write like only the ones where there are findings. In my opinion, that's good. So you don't need to. In my opinion, it's not necessary to write the layers where there are no any items found. And you can also count like if you find a structure of some sort, you can. I would really write it in the layer paper, but if you want, then you can write it here too. But there would be no bag maybe, so you just leave it empty or something, and then you would write down there below the quantity and item bags slots. You would write that yeah, there was a structure, see picture, this and this. So really feel free and improvise. It just as long as it really covers the. I want to keep this simple enough, but there's no harm done in writing more detailed info. Or you can also write like a C paper, this and that, and then you write separate papers like where where you write more in detail about the um, findings and excavation itself. What was found? What do you suspect the thing is? And I want to point out here once again that please, if you start finding a lot of items and you think there's a whole context of things to discover, please stop and inform the necessary, places about your findings. Please don't destroy the. Even if you use these methods, which I'm showing in this presentation, please rather stop and and rather stop than destroy the context and lots of info with it. Okay, then we got the second the lower part of this item sheet. uh there you got the items. You can also just item number 1, 2, 3, 4. You can feel free to number the items. In archaeology, we when we clean the items and we measure them, I'm going to show you how to measure later. But therein, you would write the info like what size it is, what weight it is, what is the item that you found, and anything else you deem like pertinent info, the material of the item, and so on. And also like in which bag it is. And sorry, that's my bad. So I would suggest you only write one item bag per sheet. So in the upper part of the sheet, you would write bag. So I would really make one sheet per item bag. If you need to continue on to another paper, of course, that's different. But don't. I wouldn't really mix the bags. I know it consumes a lot more paper, but basically you can do it, but that's not how I do it. You can item bags info. You can write there. There's like 3 different bags, and you write the names in the upper part of the paper as item bags info, and then you write them all down below. So as long as it's comprehensible, then why not? And sometimes if you find bulk stuff like bottle caps, then maybe you write there like item number 1. Then in the info you write like it contains 5 different bottle caps. One is from this brand and one is from this brand. Or you find a bullet, or you find like you find 2 bullets. Maybe you want to put them under the same item info. You can write there like as 2 bullets, 7.92 caliber, and so on, so on, so on, so on. Well, you know the drill. So, and once again, the excavator's name, and if possible, the contact info would be nice. But I didn't write there like contact info because I don't want to push people to really write it there. But if you want, it's always good to know who I can contact. And then we got the soil samples. Now this is a new thing. So I tend to not take them very deep. I take like maximum 2 centimeters from the layer surface that I'm excavating, and I would really mark it as that layer where I start the excavation from. So I would say if I took a soil sample from this example excavation number 3, where I found the item. So let's say I want to take a sample from that. So I would maybe dig 2 centimeters deep, take a little bit from. If I say there is charcoal, so I would take charcoal and a little bit of soil with it, maybe. Or if there's like some other fragments of things, or if I suspect there's a reason to take a soil sample, I would take maybe a 2 centimeter layer, maybe a 15 by 15 centimeter area. I would scoop and put in a bag, and as if it were an item bag, I would just write there like soil sample bag, and it's basically the same info. I would do the same thing, take the photos and everything. So actually, sorry, I'm going back to the excavated items thing. So please, there, when you write the info, write which photographs you taken. So write it here within the lower part of the paper. Same thing for the soil samples. You will see the lower part of paper later. So they're the same thing, the same basic info. And quantity of sample bags. How many sample bags have been taken from that excavation? Additional notes, and the second part of the paper. Here you see which layer you took it from. So if I would take those approximately 2 centimeters down from, you can of course dig deeper holes, but I think it kind of disturbs the excavation, so that's why I'm not taking them too deep. I rather take a new sample bag later when I excavate downwards. But if I notice on layer 3 that I want to take some sample, then I would really make it like write it down as sample, the layer number 3 sample, even if I dig down starting from layer 3. Well, sorry, maybe that makes sense, maybe not. So you can name the sample, like for example, like charcoal number 1, and the depth. I would really just write there the depth of that layer where I did, and maybe then add the 2 centimeters to that, like this. That's a dash. So after the dash, so I would take like 6 centimeters and dash 8 centimeters, and then you get the contents info. You can write a little bit about what is there. It can be soil, it can be whatever, but not items. Really items I would put in some other place. And it's always question, if you find some bone fragments, like, are those items or should they be soil sample? It's up to you to decide a lot. Later on we'll cover like how to preserve your findings, so bear with me, I'm gonna talk about that later. So, and there you see the same thing repeated. So pretty basic stuff, how to fill this in, and name of the excavator again. So this is like the documentation thing, and then you got which tools do I use when I measure my findings? Well, I have a scale and a tool like this, which you see here in the video. And it's advisable that it's at least 0.01 precision, so 2 decimal precision. And my scale, I think the limit is maybe, I think it's 500 grams. So you might have to find other ways to measure the weight of your finding if it's more than that. And then I use this kind of board, and I would take picture from both sides, and you can see this is a close-up picture, but somehow you can post edit, or you can just place the findings bag next to it so you can see the name of the findings. So whatever you're doing, please make sure the name is there somewhere visible. Or you can also like write a separate paper about it, like what is the name of the finding, which bag is from. You can also take like photos without the info, but at least in one picture the info should be there, so we know which item we're looking at. And I create like folders for my excavation. Like the main folder is the date, Actually, the main folder is the excavation site, and then I take then the next folders will be the dates, and then I will create a separate folder for sometimes, depending how much material there is to handle, I might create separate folders for each layer, but at least for each excavation. And and then when you and then within those folders there can be I often create new folders for the items and soil samples, and then I would um, categorize things there. I would name the files like item bag 1 and item bag 2 and so on, just as long as it's comprehensible and manageable, like and easy to access for preferably other people than you too. So here is a picture I made to clarify the previous subject a little bit further. One can, of course, take liberties in how you do this, but in my opinion, this is a logical way of doing this, the foldering, so to speak. All right, so it's necessary that I show you how I make maps of the excavated area. You can, of course, use another source for your maps than Google Maps, but like you can probably find, maybe where you're excavating. Maybe you have better quality pictures. You can always add like topographic images and like go as detailed as you want. But this is like the basic thing that I think that should be done in terms of pointing out where you're excavating. Now I know when the excavation site, the pits are almost side by side, it's hard to be very precise, especially when you zoom in with Google Maps. It's not that exact. The detail gets blurry depending where you're looking at, of course, which location you're looking at. So this picture is not really my home yard, but I think there's nobody. Pardon me if there's somebody living on this island, but to me it looks empty. So that's why I picked up this island. So at least I'm not pinpointing somebody's backyard. So here in the first picture, I would show an overall view of the area. You can always, of course, take have start from higher above, so you would see even a larger area. But I think this somewhat suffices for a general, depiction of the area, like where we're excavating. So there you see, I pinpointed. I would use my own, like I told earlier in the presentation, I would use my own phone to and put the location data on and pinpoint myself. And this is a rough pinpoint of the area where I was excavating. So therein you would place like where you are, like Hog Island, Michigan, USA, and then the Google Maps would be the source, like the provider of this map, so to speak, and home yard would be the name of the excavation, and then there would be on the right upper corner you see the date when the excavation was done, and north arrow would be nice to be there too. And there below you see the pinpointed area's coordinates. And in the next picture, I would go closer to that pinpointed area, and I often do so that I choose my first excavation pit as the pinpointed area for the first location, and then I tend to like locate my next pits based on where this the first pit is located. So there you see, I placed. I first of all, I've written their home yard and then the date, and then I put the north arrow once again there, and I made a grid around the area where I was excavating. I think it makes it a little bit easier to understand where you were uh, excavating and doing your metal detection more precisely. And then you got because it's nice to know that hey, someone was already um, uh, metal detecting this spot, and if you somewhere in your description when you describe your metal detection, these when you file a report, so to speak, um, if you mention which metal detector and what other tools you are using, then it makes it easier to understand that hey, maybe this guy wasn't using this tool, so maybe he missed this and that, or he already used this one, this tool, so maybe it's already like you know shot through the area, so to speak. So like, is there any more potential? Of course, it's easy to miss something, so it's not a bad idea to go through the same area again. And what this takes us to actually, like, if you find something, please pick it up, because or at least report that you didn't pick it up. Say there's a huge barrel underneath the soil somewhere. You don't want to pick it up. It's huge and it's empty. And so at least you should mention in the report that, hey, there's this barrel. I found it. I photographed it. I documented it, but I didn't pick it up. That's the least you should do, in my opinion. So others know that it's there, and it's already been found. And so we got here the home yard, 23rd September 2023, the date. And then below you see the coordinates, and next to the coordinates is the excavation area, the number 1. And then on the right side, you see the corresponding squares with the map, that's the excavation number 2. And here these are not actual excavations I did, but this could just well be reality. And excavation number 3 and 4. So we're thinking that they're so side by side that it's hard to pinpoint them on a map. So you would put them side by side. Of course, if you can make a rough sketch where you draw by yourself using computer or by hand, an area of your excavation, and where you pinpoint these things more exactly, you kind of more zoomed in than, or through some other means, if you can pinpoint them more exactly than this, then it's always good. Like, for example, if you're excavating a really small area, like 5 by 5 meters, for example, I would advise you to make a drawing or somehow, like, pinpoint them more exactly in relation to each other where you excavated. Where you excavated, pinpoint them in relation to each other more precisely. So in that case, you would make a similar map, but you would, like here, it's like 50 meters. Like you can see the small. Yes, the scale bar, the area, like this, with what scale it is, that should be there too. By the way, sorry, I forgot to mention it in the previous picture. So maybe you would make like 5 by 5 meters. Maybe this size length in your picture would be like 1 meter. So well, you get the point anyhow. And then in the next picture, it's the same thing, but it's the next day. And then I left the old excavation points there in the map, but I ruled them over in the list on the right side, and I created a new one, the number 5. Notice I deliberately picked this color, so be a little bit picky when you choose the color. So you can use any other things like symbols or something that will define which is what. But in this case, the color is too dark for the background, so maybe
be careful, or maybe you could make a like a white background for the list of the pits. And I tend to um, so you can choose. You can either start from like excavation number one, two, three, four again each day, or you can continue where you left the previous day. It might be the data might be more comprehensible if you keep the running numbers going and not starting from the beginning each day. In any given, the excavation area, in this case home yard. You can also slice the areas into smaller sections, and section 1, pit 2, pit 3, pit 4, so on, and sector 2, sector 3, and so on. You just, as long as it is clear, then it's not wrong to do, in my opinion. Uh, so I have not marked the coordinates for each pit, because when you look at the report paper for each excavation pit, there you have the coordinates. As long as the name, like excavation number 3 and 4 and so on, as long as they correspond um, correctly with what's written in the report, then and what's in the photographs, then it's already enough, in my opinion. That's in the report, the more exact coordinates. You can also add. It's always helpful if you add like other markers on the map too. Like, feel free to use any software to do this. You can even draw things by hand if you like. You can print out a map and just add things there and then scan it later, however you wish. And it's always helpful if you can add some notes there, like here is a brick wall, or here is a large rock. So it's easier to fathom where the excavation pit is in relation to, immobile objects, like natural objects, archaeological objects. There can be like a soil mound that is man-made, and so on. So you know you can just use your own wits, and you can make good maps that way. And speaking in general of doing documentation, like writing stuff down and making maps and things, I tend to do them as soon as I possibly can, because then your memory is fresh. You can still memorize what the excavation and the place and everything. Of course, the pictures and all the data that you collect will help you to remember things, but I would suggest you get the job done as quickly as you can. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's final time for our final chapter, and it's about storing the findings. I'm not going to go through so much about, and actually in the lecture earlier, I talked a little bit about cleaning and how to bag your findings and keep them in good condition. So that was done when I was excavating, in the chapter where I was excavating and finding that little red tin item. So towards the end of that chapter, I already told you a little bit about the importance of putting the things in the bags as soon as possible and sealing them airtight. So I'm going to continue from that. So after I have measured the findings and so on and documented them, pictured them, then I would put them usually back in the same bags where I put them in the field, with some exceptions having happened thus far. Um, I would then make sure that the heavy stuff
is when I store the things, I put them in a cardboard box, and I would make sure the heavy stuff is below and the lighter stuff is above, as not to crush the stuff. And I would make sure that it's clear what is in the box. So I would write stuff, the info down on the box, like which excavation site and what dates findings are there, and maybe even which layers are there. And I would then make sure to mark which is top and which is down of the box, as not to, you know, flip it upside down by accident, which might end up destroying some or even all, maybe not all of the findings, but some of the findings. And so these findings bags, I would uh, take as many as is convenient and place them inside another plastic bag, maybe a shop bag, and flip it around a couple of times and then close the bag. You can even use tape if you like. So this then is like doubly airtight, and it's doubly uh, uh, light tight, so to speak. Or in other words, it's double in the shade because you got the plastic bag, which I don't use transparent bags for this reason. And then you got the cardboard box, so it's double shade and double airtight. You can make the bigger plastic bag airtight or near airtight if you like. There are also big zip bags, which are more or less airtight, if you so please. And I usually write down the same info that I write on the cardboard box. Then I write the same info on the plastic bag. It makes it a whole lot easier too. So you don't need to open all the bags if you want to find something specific. So this is very key, and the storing the things in the dark and airtight space. And I don't suggest placing findings directly on the floor because maybe you got some vermin and insects that may enter the boxes much more easily if they're directly on the ground. And then you got the moisture, and maybe you got a floor heating, or also like let the air go around the findings would be preferable, that it's not directly against an exterior wall where the temperatures may change, and not directly next to a radiator that definitely will the temperatures will change. So find a place for them where the atmosphere, your uh, storage spaces microbiome, so to speak, is the steadiest. So don't let them go under the weather. I don't suggest storing things in very cold, where it goes down to minus Celsius degrees or below 33 Fahrenheit, which is the equivalent of 0 Celsius. So don't let them freeze. In other words, some items are sensitive to that. Of course, one can argue that some things were probably already there hundreds of years facing the weather, like the frost, and everything. So, and earthworms and whatever. So, but once you dig them up, that's when the deterioration process really starts in earnest. So don't be don't be cheated by thinking that they endured this long outside, outdoors. So it really is a shock for the item when it's taken up from the soil or water. And I would really suggest you find out more about storing and how to clean the items before you do so. There's a plethora, there's huge amounts of information online you can utilize for this purpose, and I think that's really part of professional and responsible metal detection. And I think without further ado, um, I thank you for having watched this presentation, and please do share it as much as you want. I would really like you to share it far and wide to get the information out. So once again, this is totally non-profit video. I'm not sponsored by anyone to do this, and just call me an anonymous archaeologist. If you want to call me something, then that would be it. and and feel free to use the report sheets that I use. Feel free to modify them to your liking. Feel free to share them forward. And there are probably a lot of variations. Take note of your and find out about wherever you're excavating. Find out about the local, like your country or province or state or county laws before you do anything. In term, whatever I presented here, make sure it's legal where you are doing it, and what other proceedings they might be asking of you when you're doing your metal detection thing. So be vigilant and please share the info and be professional, be responsible. Thank you. I think we can end the lecture here. Now, happy findings, ladies and gentlemen.